Life You Love podcast. My name is Dr. Tim Teel. I am the Doc of Unlock, and we're here this week again to help show you exactly how to unlock a life you love. I'm a retired ear, nose, and throat physician, and over the past 20 years of my practice, I discovered some very interesting things about the food we eat and the thoughts we think, and I've come to the conclusion that the food that we eat and the thoughts we think are far, far more powerful than we have ever dreamed imaginable. So I wanted to spend a podcast episode and talk about some of the lessons learned in 20 years of medicine. And we've gotten a number of requests from people to say, hey, we really appreciate listening to the philosophical things, the energy psychology, and all the rest of that. Tell me about the food. And so I wanted to spend a little time today talking about the food that we eat and the conclusions that I've come to in 20 years of practice and really experimentation, because I wasn't satisfied with the answers that we were getting based on the education that I was provided. And talking to many of my colleagues, get a little ticked off about some of the information that's kind of been withheld from us in medical education. So if you're a little unsatisfied with the answers that you're getting from your doctor, it's probably not their fault. They're doing the best that they can given the information that they have. But not, when you really want to learn something in medicine, you go out there and you just do it and you experiment with things, and you have to get outside the book. I received a fantastic piece of advice a number of years ago from an ear surgeon who was one of my trainers while I was in residency, and he took me aside one day and he said, "Tim," he said, "don't let anybody kid you. There is a lot more that we don't understand about how these bodies work and everything that's going on inside of them than that which we really truly understand. And if anybody ever tells you that they know better," he said, "run away. They are dangerously deluded." And I didn't realize what a ticket to freedom that he was giving me at the time, because what it was a license to explore things academically, to experiment, to try new things, and don't just accept the current paradigm for what it is, because the old paradigm has swung a little bit too far in one direction. If you haven't noticed, medicine's a bit of a mess today. We've got the most expensive healthcare system on the planet, bar none, and nowhere close to being the highest quality system that no that exists on the planet. In fact, last time that I checked, we were about 17, 18, 19, or 20th and dropping fast in comparison to other healthcare systems around the planet. And the reason that that is because we have politicized medicine in the United States. And anytime that you politicize anything, anytime that you mix politics and anything else, all you get is more politics, guys. And no, we've started mixing politics and medicine more than 50 years ago. But the pendulum has swung so far in one direction that you're starting to get a significant amount of fallout from physicians who are complaining of burnout, who are working in a system that doesn't serve them or their patients at the highest level anymore, and they know it. Everyone knows it. Physicians know it, patients know it, and the biggest benefactors are the people who have been legislated to be a part of the profit taking system in medicine, and that is the people who own healthcare systems, and that specifically excludes your physician. And no, which is kind of an unusual political situation. We're not going to get it into the weeds with all of that, but no, you have to understand that medicine is one of only a handful of professions on the planet where physicians are strictly forbidden from owning hospitals and healthcare facilities that participate in government or private insurance payment programs, which is really strange. But it makes no difference. It's simply the way it is. But here's the problem with it. Once that pendulum swings so far in that direction, there's a significant amount of fallout that starts to happen. People start bailing out of the system, and I'm one of those people, and I'm not alone. There's a significant number of physicians who are bailing out of the system right on schedule. In fact, as predicted by the federal government, who's been saying for 20 years that we will have a physician shortage in this country. Well, I'm not sure anybody ever thought about it, but when's the last time that the government was able to predict the weather accurately in 48 or 72 hours? Although we're getting better all the time. But to be able to look into their crystal ball and say in 20, 30 years, we're going to have a physician shortage in this country. Well, they understand that because they created the physician shortage to begin with. They have consciously taken it upon themselves to shift the profit taking in the system from the people actually providing the care to the people who own those healthcare systems. It is vividly obvious. It is not like some giant secret anymore. So I don't think anybody's going to come to my house, burn it down, or hold my children hostage to say, take it back, or else. It's just the way it is. And the fallout to it is that any system that gets highly politicized always gets very expensive. Costs go up, quality goes down. You see it in every single business that ever gets highly politicized. We see it in agriculture, we see it in medicine, we see it in finance, we see it in lots of different places in our economy, and we simply accept things as they are until we don't. And I was one of those guys. I am one of those guys who simply did not accept things as they are. Never have my entire life. Prime example of that is exactly what we're going to talk about today, and that is the food that we eat and how it affects our overall health and how I came to this conclusion because the most common patient that that I had walk through my door as an ear, nose, and throat physician had the same complaint. In fact, half of all my new adult patients for my entire career had the same complaint. They had a tickle in their throat that wouldn't go away. They had a cough that wouldn't go away. They felt like they had something stuck in their throat all the time. We call them the globus patient. We talk about them all the time at every conference that I've ever gone to in my entire career. We always talk about the globus patient. And we've always been taught to treat them as if they were reflux patients and give them more pills and more pills after that. Well, I gave a lot of patients a lot of pills and it just didn't seem to work. And I was never satisfied with the results that we were getting. And my patients weren't either. And so, stupid me, I started looking for answers and doing some reading and so forth. And the conclusions that I started to come to and the information that I started to find was that there were a number of different foods that were fairly irritating to the human body. We don't have a name for the reaction because it's not an allergy. It's not it's not a Stevens Johnson reaction. It's not a type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. It was just a reaction to food. And what I came to the conclusion of, there was a kind of a short list of foods that were common irritators of people's throats, and we identified milk and dairy products as one of those foods that was a very, very common irritator to people's throats. Sometimes it was tomatoes. Sometimes it was soybean oil. I had one guy that the offending issue was cashews. Um, Frequently, it is bread products or wheat products or pasta. Sometimes it's peppermint. But there was a relatively short list of foods that commonly caused the problem. And when we removed those foods, the problem went away. And then we would reintroduce those foods, and the problem came right back. That's a good experiment. So no, I had a handful of patients that no, that actually decided to stick with the program and say, okay, no, now that we've looked down your throat and no, decided that you didn't have a cancer, but no, but what I would do is I would slide my camera. No, I had an endoscopic camera that we could slide through your nose and no, and look down your throat. That was the most common procedure that we did in our practice to make sure that that a patient didn't have a cancer or didn't have a foreign body or something else weird stuck in there, and they rarely, if ever, did. But almost always, I learned to take that camera and stick it through their nose, down their throat, and touch the very top of their esophagus. And almost every single time, these Globus patients would say, boom, that's it, doc. I mean, they would cough and they would hack and they would say, that's it. That's exactly where I feel it. What the heck is that? And I said, that's nothing but the top of your esophagus, and it's swollen, it's sensitive. But what we have to figure out is why. And and I always told them that, gave them a speech. There's usually one of four things that causes the problem. It's either a cancer, it's something coming up, it's something going down, or it's something that you're eating that you're having some unnamed response to. And so that's why we would look down there with a can or with a camera to make sure that they didn't have a cancer. The something coming up would have been reflux, and frequently those patients had already been treated for all that, before they came to see me. Something going down was something that was directly irritating that tissue, like soda pop, very common offending factor. You take the soda pop away, in about 3 days, they would straighten up and then they'd go back to drinking it. Boom, the problem would come right back. We knew exactly what it was. So it was either a cancer, something coming up, something going down, or more commonly and most insidiously, and the most difficult to find, it was something that these patients were eating that was causing them to have this unnamed immune response that was irritating the fire out of them. So as we started pulling these different foods away, and some of those common foods, I had mentioned them briefly before, but one of the most common ones was milk and dairy products. Milk, cheese, ice cream, yogurt, sour cream, cream cheese, and pretty much anything that has dairy protein in it, A1 dairy proteins. Very, very common offending factor, very common food. In fact, it was one of the most common foods that I ate. There isn't anybody on the planet that likes cheese better than this guy. In fact, I like it so much, I married a girl named Bree, named one of my kids Jack, and came within a frog hair of naming my other one Colby. I like cheese, but it didn't like me. At the tender age of 51, I developed the same cough and the same tickle in my throat that many of my patients had, and I thought, dang it, this is terribly disappointing. Now the doctor is going to have to take his own medicine. So I got off the cheese, and in about a week or so, the cough went away, the globus sensation went away, and I felt much better. So in about 3 weeks, I went back on the cheese and said, wonder what happens. And sure enough, it came right back. So I said, dang it. I like cheese, but it doesn't like me. And so I got off the cheese and just left it alone because now I knew what the problem was. So I left it alone for 6 months, and I seemed to be doing much better. But something else was happening. I lost 30 pounds without trying, and I noticed something else. And that was I wasn't getting colds. Before that, I was getting a cold about every 3 or 4 weeks. It was like clockwork, and I just wrote it off to the fact that it was part and parcel with the job that I did. I'm up in people's faces all the time, getting coughed on and sneezed at and everything else. And then I went a year without another cold. I thought, this is really strange. And I continued to lose weight without trying, simply staying away from the dairy products. And then I went on vacation and ate like a pig and ate like I wanted to and ate a bunch of dairy. And sure enough, on the plane home, I started hacking and coughing, and I wound up with a cold, sick for a week, and got off the dairy again. Haven't had the problem since. And what I have learned, especially about dairy products, is that not only is it irritating to my body, but doing a little more reading, the milk proteins in many dairy products, in fact, 95% of the dairy products produced in the United States have a particular protein in them that causes secretory immunoglobulins to stick together. It causes them to coagulate and not function. We've noted for a long, long time in the ear, nose, and throat world that when we would do tonsillectomies on little kids, and their folks would take them home and feed them a whole bunch of ice cream, their saliva would get really thick and really sticky and really hard to handle, and frequently those kids would get sick in the post-op period. They'd get a cold or flu or something like that. And eventually, I started to learn what was going on. And what was going on is that the A1 proteins in Holstein milk cause secretory immunoglobulins, the antibodies that we have in our nose, our ears, our throat, our upper GI tract, and our lower GI tract. It causes them to stick together and not work, effectively making A1 milk an immunosuppressant. Okay. That was quite the eye opener. And no, and I thought, why are we not being taught this in medical school? Why are we not being taught this in residency? And well, the answer becomes fairly obvious once you understand the politicization of so many industries. Agriculture is one of them, medicine another, finance. There are so many highly politicized businesses or industries in the United States that it becomes fairly obvious what's going on. If you start exposing that there's a problem over here that started over there, and you say anything about it, you become really not very welcome, and you become an enemy to the system that we have set up. The problem is the system is very expensive. The system delivers very low quality. The system is driving out the thinkers and those who question the way things have always been in medicine. And I'm one of those guys. And no, I wasn't satisfied with the answers that I was getting, like I told you before. And now that that these Globus patients, me being one of them, discovered that milk and dairy products were not liking his body. And when we removed that source of irritation, other changes started to happen. I thought, wait, this is a big deal. I wonder what happens with little kids when we pull the dairy products away. So I took that information back to my clinic, parked it in my back pocket, and as we have encountered little kids with ear problems. Okay, kids with chronic ear infections or frequent ear infections that cause fluid to accumulate in their middle ear spaces. Um, we would schedule these kids for tubes, and on more than one occasion, my parents, the parents of these children, would come back to me in a week or two after we had scheduled that surgery and said, "Doc, we can't afford this. We just scheduled the surgery, and the hospital wants $5,000 out of our pocket to do the procedure, and they're going to charge my insurance another $20,000 to do this like 2-minute procedure to put some tubes in the kid's ears and suck the goo out." Well, there's another side to that, no, to that story too, because no, the way we have politicized medicine, no, we have squeezed back the doctors' compensation because everybody knows the doctor's the problem, right? The compensation for private physicians in that whole big procedure that's being paid about $25,000 between the patient's out of pocket and the insurance billing. The physician who does the surgery gets paid about $150 today. Okay. So that other $24,850 gets paid out to the hospital for providing the space to do that surgery. If you think that's okay, you belong in the United States and getting your health care in the United States. But no, when somebody is trained for 10 years of their life and is somewhere between two and six or $800,000 in debt to perform that surgery over which somebody else gets paid $25,000, and the surgeon doing the surgery gets paid $150, you're going to have a physician shortage, and that's exactly where we're at. People who have trained for years and years and years, massive amounts of money in debt, can't even make a living doing the surgeries that that need to be done if you're going to pay them 150 bucks to do it. My God, folks, you pay more to get your brakes fixed than that. So what do you think the natural fallout from that is? Obviously the government hasn't thought a great deal about this, nor their political cronies, but I can assure you the or the fallout is this. We're going to find another way to make a living, and we're going to find another way to serve these patients at the highest possible level because you're forcing innovation here. Okay, you're forcing people. You're forcing a physician shortage, and you're forcing these intelligent people to find another way to make a living and continue to solve the problem. Well, here's the solution. I took that information that I had learned back to my clinic and said, well, if you can't afford the tubes, you can't afford the surgery, and you can't even afford the out of pocket expense. There is another alternative that I'm starting to kind of discover. And they said, really, what's that? And I said, how much milk, cheese, ice cream, yogurt, cream cheese, and sour cream does this kid eat? And almost universally, these kids that had ear problems, the answer was, that's all they eat. And I said, there's your problem. And they said, what do you mean? And I told them my story about withdrawing the dairy products from my own experience and from that of my adult patients. And I said, the cheapest cost effective option here, highly effective option, is to just take the dairy products out of these kids' diets for a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and see what happens. Here's what happened. They cleared up, guys. Almost universally. There were a handful that that didn't. They had other structural problems. But what we learned in that experience was that that we're making ourselves sick with the food that we're eating. Food that we've been told all our lives is good for you. Well, anytime that the government tells you that the food's good for you, you got to ask who's benefiting from that. And the answer, not at all a secret, lies in the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, wanting to get out of the dairy subsidy business in the 1990s. And so what they did was they worked with the dairy industry to put on probably the most successful advertising campaign in the history of food, and that was the Got Milk campaign and the cheese campaigns and the cheese giveaways and putting milk really high on the food pyramid and telling everybody it was really good for them. And it was probably the most successful marketing campaign in history, particularly sponsored by a government that wanted to get out of the dairy business, the dairy subsidy business. They wanted to stop buying all this milk because it was ridiculous. They didn't want to spend the money to prop up an industry that didn't have any demand. So what did they do? They increased demand. Here's what they didn't understand. Here's what they didn't pay any attention to, and that none of us want to pay any attention to because we all, just like me, like the product. It tastes good. We've been told it's good for us, and we like it. And cheese is pretty much awesome on everything, and I get it. Here's a question that you have to ask that nobody's asking. Look around in nature and tell me how many animals drink another animal's milk? Anywhere? Yes, you see lions kill animals that are lactating, and it's the very first thing that they eat. And I understand why, because it tastes good. Okay, but no, but those lions don't make a steady diet out of it, and no, there isn't a single animal on the planet in the natural world that drinks another animal's milk. And there's certainly no other animal on the planet except us that takes that milk product and turns it into a million other things. And listen, I get it. I was also in addition to being a journalism major in college, I also took a fascinating interest in food science. And when you start manufacturing food, it, it is like liquid gold to have liquid protein, to add to almost any manufactured food product because it makes things stick together, and it is unbelievably valuable to have liquid protein. Well, that's what milk is. It's liquid protein. We can separate the fat out. We can use that for butter. We can make cream out of it. But it's the liquid proteins in milk that make it so unbelievably useful in food manufacturing because it helps us to stick things together. The problem is we don't realize one of the primary functions of milk and what it does in the mammalian baby. It's a survival mechanism. It is a very powerful survival mechanism, and the survival mechanism works like this. That mother has a ready supply of a nutrient rich food that irritates, and this is the part that nobody wants to talk about, but this is exactly what I learned is if you go back and listen to the first half of this podcast, it is a protein that irritates the baby's body. Why would we want to irritate that baby's body? Because systemic inflammation or gut-derived inflammation is a signal to that baby's body to store this energy as fat. Why would we want fat babies? Makes sense. You've ever watched Bambi? Okay, what happened to Bambi's mom? She gets whacked, right? Well, would how long would Bambi survive if he was skinny? Right? But no, if he had a little bit of fat on him, we just bought Bambi some time to find something else to eat after his mother gets killed. It is a powerful survival mechanism that our creator built into the mammal, and that is to irritate that baby's body, tell his body that that's a signal to store this energy as fat so that if your mother gets whacked, you've got some time to find something else to eat. So in the natural world, how long do babies suck on mama's tit? Like 6 to 9 months, right? Well, what does mom do at 6 to 9 months? She kicks them off, and then what happens to her? She dries up. Okay, she dries up, guys. Not only does mom know instinctively to get her babies off of that food, but physiologically, she stops making it. Okay, milk is a survival food that irritates our bodies, causes us to be fat, and if you don't get off of it, it'll make you sick. Probably won't kill you, but it'll make you sick until you figure out maybe you should stop eating the milk products because we have this overwhelming philosophy that we have to dominate the world that we live in with chemistry and with a million different sorts of petroleum based um, chemical products to dominate the natural world and therefore make it better. Now we're starting to understand that no, that maybe we haven't done the no, maybe that wasn't the right way to go, and no, we're starting to make people sick. And many people have come to the conclusion. In fact, the heir to the Baskin Robbins fortune, his name is Ocean Robbins, and his dad's name escapes me, but no, but they came to the conclusion long ago that the product that made their family very wealthy was also killing people. And philosophically, they said, no, we're not going to do this. And now Ocean Robbins is an outspoken advocate for understanding the very things that we're talking about here, and that is understanding the immunologic effect that foods have on our body, and it was designed that way on purpose. I have heard over and over and over again, folks, that such a symphony as this beautiful natural world that we live in does not exist, nor was it created without a conductor. And that conductor, I believe, is God Himself, that that created this entire fantastic ecosystem on purpose with a purpose. And once we start to understand the purpose, and understand how these different foods interact with our bodies, all of a sudden a million doors start to open up and our understanding starts to expand. However, the vast majority of physicians in Western medicine today do not understand these concepts because they have not been taught these concepts. It has been withheld from them. It is not their fault that they aren't teaching you these things. It is that they have gone along with the narrative that says, we know what we're doing and we have a pill for every problem. And I would respectfully disagree that that a pill for every problem is the answer. Understanding is, and we can come back to this topic a little later on. But my apologies to everybody in the dairy business. I am myself an Iowa farm boy. I have a lot of friends that that grew up milking cows. In fact, I had some milk cows when I was growing up as well, simply doing what it is that we told was good for everybody. And now we understand differently. And that, my friends, is a part of simply just growing up. This is not a political talk. This is not I'm right and you're wrong sort of thing. This is simply sharing the information that I have learned in 20 years of treating patients and myself in Western medicine. And Western medicine just came up short on answers. And stupid me, all I wanted to do was fix the friggin' problem. And once I did, we'll tell you what happened in another episode. But suffice it to say that I've been a little unwelcome in Western medicine 3 times. 3 times I got kicked out. One time because I wasn't doing enough surgery. Another time for being foolish enough to think that our entire healthcare system actually cared about patient safety. That was a terrible mistake. And the third time for successfully treating my patients for inflammatory conditions, finding the source of those inflammatory conditions, and helping people understand where that inflammation was coming from, correcting it, and a myriad of other problems started to get solved. And all of a sudden, I became massively unwelcome in my practice group because I was solving problems that somebody else was being paid to manage. We'll talk more about that as we go along. So take it home today. Experiment with what I'm telling you. I can assure you that nobody has ever died of a dairy deficiency, and the vitamin D and the calcium arguments and all the rest of that stuff are complete and total hoo-ha. As my grandfather would say, that there's horse hockey. And in an awful lot of cases, we're going to find out that that all the things that we thought milk was helping was actually hurting. And as these ideas get examined, mostly outside of medicine, because medicine is very political still, you're going to start seeing people believing their physicians less and less all the time. In fact, we suffer from that tremendously today because information like this is out there in the marketplace, and people are starting to experiment with it on their own because changing the food that you eat is pretty low risk. And if you remove and start removing the things from that diet that are very irritating to it, and irritating to it on purpose, because that's the way we were designed, and you start respecting the natural world that we live in, and the very design of that natural world, and instead of trying to dominate it, understand it and work with it, flourishing good health and expansive well-being are the results of that. So, folks, I appreciate your time. I told everybody we try and keep these discussions down to about 30 minutes or so, and I want to keep that agreement. So, I appreciate your time. Um, Read my book. If you want to learn some more about it, go to my website, www.docofunlock.com, docofunlock.com. You can download a copy of my book, Cracking the Caveman's Code. There's a whole lot more in it than what we've talked about it today here on the Unlock a Life You Love podcast. There are story after story after story of the crazy things that we started to uncover in my medical practice. Once you kind of unlock your mind and unlock uh, your creativity and explore the world just a little bit, And what I found was the food we eat and the thoughts we think are far, far more powerful determinants of the quality of our life experience and our overall health than we have ever imagined. So appreciate your time. Come back and listen next week. We'll come up with some fascinating thing to talk to. We may just continue this conversation a little bit more because it's a big topic and it's one that a lot of people are interested in and discussing out there. We're going to shut her off today. My name is Dr. Tim Teel. I am the Doc of Unlock. Thanks for tuning in to the Unlock a Life You Love podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.